Hello everybody, it's Lazel here with another draft in Phyrexia. All will be one. Sadly, I played the whole draft with my microphone being offline. It was a super cool draft, but it ended in, just the game audio. So I'm re-recording the current audio and I will just talk a little bit about this deck that I have drafted, and I will this time only show the highlight games because this is also something that I want to test with you guys. Please give me some feedback about this because I have seen that all of my draft games and all of the gameplay that I upload is actually really long, and I want to know what's interesting for you guys. Do you want to see only the drafting mechanisms that I play, or on the draft itself that I play, and then just a few highlight games? Are you interested in all of the games that I play, or would you really just like, hey, just go for the really cool honorable mention games, also the cool losses, the cool wins and stuff like that? Or are you interested in all of the games to see how different cards perform in this set or in drafts in general? I think this is something that I have found out for myself, that I really like to play blinds pretty blind, though you cannot really go blind into a draft anymore, because before you know it, you have seen some of the new spoilers for the new set, and then you're always like, okay, all right, I know what's coming, I know which cards are played in the current set, and most likely you see a pretty good synergy. Currently you see that I'm, for example, hovering over the Vorak, and the Vorak is simply a really good card that I will also be playing quite a few times in this draft. Alright, so I will speed the process up from here on now, and then we will jump to the two highlight games of mine. This deck that I have built is built around the Phyrexian Vindicator, a 4-mana with 4 white symbols, 5/5 flyer. I don't know all of the stat lines of the creature, but the interesting thing about it is that if damage is dealt to it, this damage is prevented, and the damage prevented this way can be dealt to any target that I want. So I was interested in going for a mono white deck, but then I simply had some really good picks, like 2 Voreks right away, and that is simply a very powerful card. And then I thought like, okay, maybe the toxic deck might be interesting for me, and then it ended up in me drafting the Selesnya toxic deck a little bit. I was going simply for high value cards in the set, for example the Ambassador or the Duelist with Planar Disruption, and then and so on. So I got this really cool deck together, and I'd say we jump right into the games that I've had with it. And yeah. We are going for one of the wins that I've had. And the opening hand is, it is pretty risky because I didn't have any real early play, but I do have to say I was on the draw, which is always helpful. I also had 3 planes. This hand here that I then mulliganed, or the hand that I mulliganed, was simply not fast enough. This one I was really relying on the Scrap Gorger because I had double forest, and I definitely wanted to keep it. And here I ditched the against all odds. And overall my opponent started out with the plains, I followed up with a forest. Then our opponent played a duelist. Our opponent had a really strong start there. Luckily we drew a land, sadly a forest. And then our opponent followed up with another plains, played a Rask's Fall. That was very devastating for me. I thought like that this draft is over for me, because then I followed up with a Vorak. Luckily, Vorak made it happen for me to at least have some board presence, and the Vorak can profitably block the Duelist. Sadly, I didn't find a land with the ETB of the Warwick, and my opponent followed up with a Zealot. So that is a 3/3 Duelist double strike that is now coming at us. I thought, okay, I have the Warwick on the field, I can stabilize a little bit. Luckily, I found the planes. That was so much luck there. And yeah, Ossification onto one of my lands. Ossification, such a powerful spell. And then I was considering which creature I want to remove, and then I went for the cheaper creature because I also had the Predation in hand. And if your opponent destroys the Ossification in any way, they will get back the creature. So I went for the Duelist there because it's simply easier to interact with. My opponent played the planes, followed up with the normal Duelist, which is not a real threat to me. And then I played my Zealot and started pressuring my opponent with a 4/4 Warwick each turn. Something that I don't know if I did the misplay in this game, but sticking to firsting routes was something that I did it in one of the games earlier. Sometimes I kept it in hand to simply have the mechanic of proliferating, or to have the option to proliferate at some point, but then I just realized, hey, you are at such a good spot in this game. You need to thin out your deck way more often and way faster. So this time I did it right, and I went for the firsting routes to simply find a land, thin out my deck. I went for the triggered ability and attacked for another 4. My Zealot is able to block every creature of my opponent. And then I followed up with the Ambassador. Also an interesting creature. I thought it would be better in draft, but there is the black removal spell, the -1/-1, that removes it right away. And yeah, that was not that easy to handle, or that wouldn't have been that easy to handle. My opponent with a really good draw there with the Skull Bomb to get back a creature and also to draw a card, so a lot of value for my opponent. But we were pretty fast there. And then I had the very lucky draw of getting, I think now I get Titanic Grove. Yeah, I got it there. And so I went for an all-out attack because, yeah, I simply wanted to pressure my opponent. I had a lot of interaction with the Indestructible from the Ambassador, with Titanic Grove in my hand, and I knew my opponent with a 2/2 and a 1/4 couldn't really kill anything of mine. And either way, I still would have been able to pump over, and there my opponent goes for a few blocks. And yeah, I simply went for the opportunity, first used the Ambassador ability to bait any instant speed interaction from my opponent, and then I saw, okay, he has nothing, let's go for Titanic Grove and go for the win there. My opponent in response sacrifices the Duelist because Corrupted is enabled, didn't find anything, and I went for the win. Warwick, MVP of this game, also as Ossification. And now let's jump into the highlight game, in my opinion. Because in this one, we actually did something with the Vindicator. I tried to build a deck that, yeah, pretty easily or focuses on ramping into the Vindicator. And in most games in this draft, I simply didn't find it. And I relied on my other win cons, as you might have seen, or as you have seen in the game we just played. Kept this hand, very risky hand, because, yeah, we first start doing something on turn 4. And but I kept it because I wanted to get the Basilica out of the way. We were lucky my opponent is playing a blue deck, so I thought, okay, he might not be that aggressive. And then he followed up with a Watcher. Is a great creature simply for constant attacks in the air. We were lucky with a Viral spawning on turn 3. And yeah, my opponent attacked us for 1 and played an Observer. Now on turn 4 we were able to resolve anything that I wanted. My opponent is tapped out. And there, I don't know if it was the correct play, but I definitely wanted to build an aggressive board presence. We already had a 3/3 on the board, and then I simply wanted to follow up with the Mantis as long as we were still able to resolve it without a problem. And yeah, then this play came. Retrofitter with the ability onto the Watcher is just so powerful because your opponent simply creates a 4/4 flying vigilance and constantly attacks you. It's a really powerful play in my opinion. And yeah, there I was simply forced to keep up the pressure from my side, and I knew, okay, with the devotion in hand, I was able to go for the profitable trade there, because I know 4/4 Flying Vigilance is scary, definitely. So I went for that line of play. And yeah, that did quite well. Still, Watcher, a really good creature in the set because of the death trigger. When it dies, you get to draw a card, which helps a lot. And then my opponent is nicely hitting his land drops, or hitting the land drops. Retrofitter, a card that I haven't seen that often. And I think that there's a reason for it, but I don't know why it has the toxic line on it. I think it's not really that necessary. And here we were at the point where I was like, okay, I can put out some aggression on the ground, and then I can simply cast my Expand the Sphere, a ramp spell, which is most likely won't be countered. So yeah, I went for the aggressive line, attacked, removed an oil counter. And there we go. Opponent blocks. I wanted to get the Observer out of the way. And we were good to go. And that is simply the point where I said, okay, if the Expansive Sphere gets countered, it's okay. But I still hold a lot of interaction in my hand. My opponent doesn't counter it. And we find a Plains in the forest. So we are set up for the following turns. We still have a Mantis on the board, which even without all counters is still a 4/3. That, yeah, hits pretty hard. Our opponent finds a Prism. I think it's an interesting card in drafts. If you really have the, an artifact deck, it can be a good card, but in most cases it's quite tough. Mesmerizing those on our Mantis is something that I wasn't afraid of at all, simply because of the reason that with Against All Odds we can get back a creature from our graveyard and we can flicker one of our creatures. So I went for the line of predation, my Vindicator against the opponent's Retrofitter. The trigger from Vindicator went straight up to our opponent's face. There again, I didn't stick around with the Thirsting Roots and I immediately went for it. And there we go. Against all odds, as I've said, it also might have been quite good to go with Thirsting Roots for the Proliferate to get my opponent corrupted so I can viral spawning. But yeah, so we are good to go there. Our opponent on a 3-color deck, which is quite challenging in my opinion. In Phyrexia all will be one. We were lucky to draw a Vorik. Vorik is simply a very strong creature card, and you will see now why. I was considering to play Against All Odds, but then I thought like, I can play the Vorik and use the flicker mechanic simply on the Vorik for even more value from Vorik. And then I didn't find anything, and I thought like, let's still proliferate. And I then remembered, hey, I have a viral spawning in the graveyard, so I recast that one with flashback. And I still saved my Against All Odds and still got a creature out of that one. Our opponent is trying to find something. And I think that my opponent will still play a flying creature, if I remember correctly. Yeah, a Watcher. Followed up. I think another Retrofitter will come now. And that will be super dope because my Phyrexian Vindicator will then go for the win. Yeah. He filters with the Prism into Retrofitter, giving the Watcher another 4/4. So actually a really cool idea of our opponent, I do have to say that. We will go for an all-out attack here, and our opponent is forced to jump block our Phyrexian Vindicator. The damage will be prevented, and that will end in us dealing another 4 damage to any target, and we will choose our opponent's face. So overall, super fun and a really cool draft there. Ended sadly in a 6-3 draft. And the losses that we had, as in so many scenarios, is either we only drew lands or we drew too many lands. So no lands or too many lands. Here we cracked the packs from the draft, evolved Spinoderm, followed by Norn's Wellspring. So not that good cards yet. But then I think it was now when we... Oh no, Red Sun's Twilight, and I think now we got a real bomb out of this one. because we got Raska, Betrayal Sting, super strong Planeswalker. And yeah, I take it. Third pack, or third last pack, is the Ran Executioner Pain. Followed by Caramonics. I think these cards aren't... well, Ran is playable in Standard, but I haven't seen Caramonics yet. And then, last but not least, Encroaching Mycosynth. And overall, as I've said earlier, guys, let me know down in the comments below what you think about me changing things up like this. This was now just by accident because my microphone didn't work during the draft itself. But what do you think about me only showcasing the highlight games of the draft and maybe then the final results and and then also the complete draft of the deck? I'm really interested in what you want to see. And as always, I'll make my draft as transparent as possible, showing wins and losses, but let me know what you want to see.